So you're a trust officer. What makes you start working for Children's Home Society?
Well, one of my coworkers was on the board. Tom Shelby was his name, and Tom was on their board, and then had decided to take a job in Arizona to move up the ladder, I guess. And he told me he was leaving the state, and would I be interested in taking his place on this board? And didn't know anything about Children's Home Society, but I thought, well, yeah, community involvement's good. I'll join this nonprofit board. And so I joined the board and was on the board of directors for maybe 4 or 5 years, and became more and more interested in their mission.
Hmm.
And then one day after a board meeting, the executive director asked me to hang around. And he said, we've got a foundation, but the director of the foundation left a couple of years ago, and I'd just not been able to find anybody that can lead it. Do you know anybody? And I said, no, I really don't. And then he said, well, what about you? So this was his ploy all along. And so I interviewed for the job, and then they offered it to me, and then I turned it down. I thought, no, I'm a lawyer. I'm doing wills and trusts and estates in the bank, and I'm using my law degree. I'm a vice president. I've got a car. I've got a country club membership. I've got it made. And I shouldn't throw that over for a nonprofit fundraising job. Well, then I regretted it afterwards. Very shortly after, they hired somebody else. And then I went back to Dave Loving was his name, the director. And I said, Dave, I made a mistake. If you have another opening at any time in any role, if you give me another chance, I'd like to come work for Children's Home. So then,
How did you know? So that some people, I do these interviews to help people, right, live their own lives.
right.
How old were you? Probably just a kid still, right?
I would have been about 38,
Okay, all right.
37.
How did you know it was wrong? What made you know that?
Well, as a trust officer, sometimes you administer estates or trusts. A lot of what you do is help people manage money,
Hmm.
and some of them are fairly well off. And so, in one way of looking at it, you help pretty rich people stay rich or get richer.
Hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's nothing particularly laudatory about it either. I mean, it's an occupation that's respectable, but at the end of the day, I want to look in the mirror and think I did something good for the world, good for society, something I feel better about. And so I thought I would find that at Children's Home, and I did.
Were you in politics while you were at Children's Home too?
Yes, I started work at Children's Home in 1990, and then about 4 years later, I was approached to run for the legislature. And that year, though, in 1994, Children's Home was raising money in the Black Hills for a big project in the Black Hills at Black Hills Children's Home. And so I said, I did talk to Dave Loving, the director. I talked to my family, and they were all supportive. But realistically, it would be impossible to campaign because I'd be spending so much time in Rapid City raising money for Black Hills Children's Home. In fact, my wife and our family moved to the Black Hills Children's Home that summer and lived there so I could be in Rapid City every day and not lose touch with the kids and Linda. But then 2 years later, we were done in Rapid City and we were back on the farm. And so I ran, and the board was supportive and Dave was supportive. And so what I would do is I'd work at Children's Home all year and then take leave during the legislative session and live in a motel in Pierre for those 8 to 10 weeks, and then back to work at Children's Home after session goes over.